The conference chamber floated in the void between stars, a massive structure that gleamed with the power of 1,000 conquered worlds. Inside, Fleet Admiral Kethzara stood before the holographic display, her scaled hands clasped behind her back. The blue light of distant suns reflected off her ceremonial armor as she studied the target. A yellow star, a small system, the third planet from that unremarkable sun. Terra, she said, testing the alien word on her tongue. It sounded soft, weak. The Zintharian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 12,000 years. They had brought 847 worlds under their control. Some had surrendered peacefully. Others had fought and lost. The result was always the same. The empire grew stronger, and another species learned their place in the grand order of things. This would be conquest number 848. Admiral, her second officer spoke, his voice uncertain. We have received messages about this system. Kethzara turned. In all her centuries of service, she had never heard hesitation in Commander Drask's voice. He was a warrior, bred for battle, enhanced for command. Hesitation was not in his nature. What kind of messages? Drask activated his datapad. The holographic display shifted, showing a transmission. The source was marked as the Velkari, an ancient race that had existed long before the Empire rose to power. They rarely spoke to anyone anymore, preferring to observe from their hidden worlds at the galaxy's edge. The message was simple, 4 words in Galactic Standard. The Deathworlders must not be provoked. Kethzara felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. She pushed it aside. The Velkari are old and afraid. They see threats in shadows. What else? Another transmission appeared. This one was rougher, recorded by a dying ship captain. The vessel had been a pirate raider, attacking trade routes near the Sol system. Most of the crew was dead. The captain's final log was barely coherent. They followed us, the voice rasped, across 3 light years. We hurt one of their cargo ships. Just one. They hunted us for weeks. They never stopped. Never gave up. We're faster, better armed. Doesn't matter. They're still coming. They came from prey animals, but they became apex predators. Don't go there. Whatever you do, don't. The message ended in static. Drask pulled up another file. The Galactic database has the Sol system flagged, Admiral. Multiple warning symbols. Our translators cannot properly interpret all of them, but the categories include extreme danger, quarantine zone, and... He paused. Cultural hazard. Cultural hazard? Kethzara had never heard that classification. Before, it means a species whose ideas and beliefs could spread and destabilize other civilizations, explained Drask. Usually reserved for telepathic hive minds or reality-altering entities. The Admiral walked closer to the display, studying the data on the third planet, Terra, Earth, a small world, mostly water with extreme weather variations. Gravity was higher than standard. Oxygen levels were dangerously elevated. The planet rotated around a relatively unstable star. It was classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest possible rating. And yet, intelligent life had evolved there. Against all probability, a species called humans had not only survived, but thrived. They have only been spacefaring for 273 years, Kethzara noted. They have no interstellar colonies. Their technology is primitive. Their ships are slow. They have no energy shields, no plasma weapons, no quantum cores. Yes, Admiral, Drask agreed. On paper, they should not present a challenge. On paper, Kethzara repeated. She had learned long ago that reality and paper were often very different things. She accessed the cultural database. What she found was disturbing. The humans had spent most of their recorded history fighting each other. They had developed thousands of different cultures, languages, and belief systems. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with biological weapons, nuclear bombs, and environmental collapse. And yet they persisted. Their entertainment was violent. Their literature celebrated warriors. Their history was an endless cycle of conflict, adaptation, and survival. They had a saying that appeared in many of their languages. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. On most worlds, such a philosophy would be considered insanity. On Earth, it was apparently common sense. There is one more message, Admiral, Drask said quietly. He seemed reluctant to show it. The final transmission came from a merchant captain who had traded with the humans peacefully. She had died 3 days ago from radiation poisoning after her ship's core failed. But before she died, she had sent a message to the Empire. I met them, the old merchant said, her voice weak but clear. The humans. They are kind, generous, they laugh easily and make friends quickly. They love stories and art and music. They are wonderful people. She coughed and dark blood appeared at the corner of her mouth. But I saw their history. I saw what they do when threatened. I saw what they become when they need to survive. Admiral, whoever you are, please listen. Do not make them your enemy. They pack bond with anything. They hold grudges across generations. They see every setback as just another problem to solve. They name their warships Vengeance and Retribution and Indomitable. And they mean it. The message ended. The conference chamber was silent. Kethzara stood motionless, processing everything she had learned. Around her, the other officers of the Third Conquest Fleet waited for her decision. Finally, she spoke. These warnings come from frightened prey species, dying pirates, and overly cautious merchants. The Empire does not build its policy on fear and rumor. But Admiral, Drask began. We have our orders, Kethzara interrupted. The High Council has designated Terra as our next conquest. The humans have resources we need, territory we want, and they are not part of any defensive pact with other species. They are alone, isolated, vulnerable. She turned to face her command staff. Prepare the fleet. We depart for the Sol system in 3 days. This will be a standard operation. Overwhelming force. Demonstrate our power. Accept their surrender. If they resist, we crush them quickly. The officers saluted and dispersed to their duties. Alone in the chamber, Kethzara looked once more at the small blue world on her display. Something about it unsettled her in a way she could not name. She dismissed the feeling. She was a conqueror. She had broken entire civilizations. One small planet of primitive apes would not be different. The fleet admiral did not know it yet, but she had just made the worst decision of her long life. The Third Conquest Fleet began preparations for departure. Their destination, a small yellow star and the death world that orbited it. They had been warned, multiple times. By multiple sources, they ignored every single warning. The arrival was meant to be terrifying. 300 warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Earth's solar system. They came in formation, their hulls gleaming with the reflected light of the sun. Each vessel was the size of a city. Each one carried enough firepower to crack a planet's crust. This was the Zintharian way. Arrive with overwhelming force. Make resistance seem hopeless. Accept surrender. Move on to the next world. Fleet Admiral Kethzara watched from her command throne as her fleet moved into position around the small blue planet. Scans showed exactly what the intelligence reports had predicted. Primitive orbital stations, a small moon base, satellites that appeared to be for communication and observation only. The humans had detected them, of course. That was expected. Radio signals flooded the void, bouncing between the planet and various outposts. The computers translated the traffic automatically. Most of it was panic. Some of it was defiance. All of it was irrelevant. Begin standard intimidation protocol, Kethzara ordered. On the main view screen, she watched as one of her battle cruisers positioned itself over an uninhabited island, in what the humans called the Pacific Ocean. The ship's main plasma cannon charged, building up energy until it glowed like a small sun. Then it fired. The beam struck the island dead center. Rock vaporized instantly. The ocean boiled. A mushroom cloud rose into the atmosphere, visible from space. In 30 seconds, the island ceased to exist. The message was clear. Resist, and your cities will suffer the same fate. Kethzara waited for the expected response. Panic, chaos, desperate pleas for negotiation. Instead, a single transmission came from the planet's surface. Audio only. A human voice, male, speaking in Galactic Standard with a surprisingly good accent. This is Secretary General Martinez of the United Earth Government. We receive your demonstration. We request a diplomatic meeting to discuss terms. Kethzara allowed herself a satisfied smile. They understood. This would be a quick conquest after all. Transmit our demands, she ordered. Total surrender within 72 hours. Their military forces will disarm. Their government will dissolve. Their resources will be transferred to imperial control. In exchange, we will not harm their civilian population. It was the standard offer. Most species accepted it, the human voice responded. We will need time to discuss this with our leadership. 72 hours is acceptable. Professional. Calm. Almost too calm. Admiral, Drask said quietly, pulling up data on his station. I'm detecting unusual activity on the planet's surface. What kind of activity? Military mobilization. Global scale. They're moving assets but not retreating. They're repositioning, establishing defensive perimeters around major cities. Their satellite network is being reconfigured. He looked up, confused. Admiral, they're preparing to fight. Keth Zara leaned forward. They cannot seriously believe they can resist us. But the data did not lie. Every human military on the planet was moving with purpose and coordination. Worse, they were doing it quickly. Too quickly, as if they had planned for this exact scenario. Send a reconnaissance drone to one of their major cities, she ordered. I want live footage. The drone descended into Earth's atmosphere, its cameras recording everything. What Keth Zara saw disturbed her more than she wanted to admit. The city was called New York. Millions of humans lived there, packed into towering structures that reached for the sky. The drone's sensors detected weapons everywhere. Not just military weapons, civilian weapons. Humans owned instruments of death the way other species owned tools. But that was not the disturbing part. The humans were not panicking. They were not fleeing. They were preparing. The drone's camera captured a scene in a public square. A large screen showed the Imperial fleet in orbit. Around it, humans gathered. They were not crying or screaming. They were angry, determined. Some held signs with messages in various languages. The translator parsed them. Remember the Alamo. They chose this fight. Not one step back. Give them hell. Kethazara did not understand the cultural references, but the sentiment was clear. Pull up their entertainment database, she ordered. I want to understand these creatures. For the next hour, she reviewed what humans created for amusement. She watched their films about wars, read their books about survival, listened to their music about defiance and struggle, studied their games where players simulated combat, strategy, and conquest. A pattern emerged. Humans were obsessed with conflict, but not just participating in it, winning it against impossible odds. Their heroes were always outnumbered, outgunned and surrounded, and their heroes always found a way. This is fiction, Drask said, reading over her shoulder. Fantasy. It means nothing. Does it? Kethzara pulled up Earth's actual history. The wars, the battles, the empires that rose and fell. She found thousands of examples of humans fighting when they should have surrendered, winning when they should have lost, surviving when they should have died. At a place called Thermopylae, 300 soldiers held back an army of thousands. At Stalingrad, humans fought building by building in the middle of winter. At a place called Britain, a small island nation stood alone against a continental empire and refused to break. The examples went on and on. For thousands of years, they evolved as prey animals, Kethazara said quietly, reading the biological data. Hunted by larger, stronger predators. Weak compared to the other animals on their world. Yes, Admiral. But they developed intelligence, tools, cooperation. No. Kethazara shook her head. They developed more than that. They developed persistence. They learned to track prey across vast distances, to hunt until their target collapsed from exhaustion. They learned to throw spears with accuracy, to plan ambushes, to work in groups. She pulled up more data. Look at their biology. They can run for hours without stopping. They can survive on almost any food source. They can adapt to almost any climate. They heal from injuries that would kill most species. They can function on minimal sleep for days. They're from a death world, Admiral. These traits make sense for survival. Yes, Kethazara agreed. But then look what they did with those traits. They did not just survive their world. They conquered it. They eliminated or domesticated every competing predator. They built cities on fault lines and volcanoes. They crossed oceans in wooden boats. They split the atom. They went to space on controlled explosions. She turned to face Drask. Commander, these are not prey animals who happen to develop intelligence. These are apex predators who started as prey and never forgot what it feels like to be hunted. Drask was silent for a moment. Are you saying we should withdraw, Admiral? Kethzara looked at the planet below. Beautiful. Blue and green and white. From space it looked peaceful, serene, but she knew better now. That planet was a forge, and it had been shaping these humans for millions of years. "No," she said finally. "We have our orders. But modify the battle plan, increase the fleet's defensive perimeter, keep all ships at maximum alert, and tell the troops being prepared for ground assault that this will not be easy." 68 hours remained until the deadline. On Earth's surface, humanity watched the alien fleet and made their own preparations. They had been alone in the galaxy for so long, wondering if anyone else was out there, hoping to find friends among the stars. Now they had their answer, and they had 72 hours to prepare for war. A human general stood in a command center deep beneath a mountain. Around her, screens showed the deployment of forces across the globe. Someone asked if they should send a message to the aliens, a final plea for peace. The general shook her head. "We tried diplomacy. We offered them a chance to leave. They chose to stay and threaten us." She looked at the countdown clock. 72 hours. "They think we'll surrender," the general said quietly. "They think we'll see their ships and their weapons and just give up," she smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Let them think that for 72 more hours. Then we'll teach them why you don't threaten a death world." The 72 hours ended with silence. Fleet Admiral Kethazara sat on her command throne, watching the countdown reach 0. No message came from Earth, no surrender, no final plea. Just silence. "Send the final warning," she ordered. "Tell them they have 1 additional hour. After that, we begin bombardment of military targets." The transmission was sent. The hour began. Kethazara expected panic now. Desperate last-minute negotiations. Instead, all she got was a single message from the human Secretary General. "We gave you a chance to leave. That was more mercy than you showed the others." Then every human transmission ceased. Every satellite went dark. Every radio signal stopped. Earth fell silent. "Admiral," Drask said, concern in his voice. "This is not normal behavior. They should be—" The sensor alarm screamed. Kethzara's viewscreen exploded with warnings. Weapons fire from the planet's surface. Hundreds of trajectories. Railguns that had been hidden inside civilian structures. Mass drivers disguised as mining equipment. Kinetic projectiles launched from electromagnetic catapults that should not exist in such a primitive civilization. "Evasive maneuvers," she shouted. The Imperial fleet scattered, but they were too large, too slow. The human weapons were simple. Just metal projectiles accelerated to extreme speeds. No plasma, no exotic matter. Just kinetic force. But at orbital velocities, kinetic force was more than enough. A human projectile struck the hull of the battle cruiser Eternal Victory. The metal rod, no larger than a human, punched through shields and armor like they were paper. It traveled through 3 decks before exiting the other side. The secondary explosions killed 400 crew members. More impacts. The cruiser Infinite Glory lost its main engines. The destroyer Swift Judgment began tumbling out of orbit, its navigation systems destroyed. "Return fire," Kethzara ordered. "Target those weapons platforms." The Imperial fleet unleashed its plasma cannons. Beams of superheated matter struck Earth's surface. Cities should have burned. Continents should have been scarred. But the humans had prepared. The weapons platforms were decoys, reinforced structures designed to take a hit while protecting the real guns hidden underground. The plasma beams struck empty buildings and abandoned facilities. The real weapons kept firing. "Admiral, we're detecting cyber intrusion attempts across the fleet network," the communications officer reported. "The humans are trying to hack our systems." "Impossible. Our encryption is they're using quantum computing, Admiral. And they're adapting their attack patterns faster than our AI can compensate." Kethzara felt ice in her veins. Quantum computing. The humans had developed quantum computing. Intelligence reports said they were decades away from that technology. Intelligence reports had been wrong. Isolate all infected systems. Switch to manual control. Deploy ground forces immediately. We need to take those surface weapons offline. 30 dropships launched from the fleet, each carrying 100 soldiers. They were the Empire's finest warriors. Enhanced with genetic modifications. Trained for decades. Armed with plasma rifles and energy shields. They had conquered 40 worlds between them. Earth would be their last. The dropships entered the atmosphere over what humans called the Middle East. A desert region. Perfect for deployment. No civilians to worry about. Open terrain. Easy visibility. The moment the ships landed, they came under fire. Human soldiers emerged from hidden positions in the sand. They wore suits designed to blend with their environment. They carried weapons that fired chemical propellants. Primitive, loud, brutal, and devastatingly effective. The first wave of Zintharian soldiers fell in seconds. Their energy shields deflected plasma and lasers, but they had not been calibrated for solid projectiles. Human bullets punched through the shields and tore into flesh. "Adjust shield frequencies," the ground commander ordered. "Compensate for kinetic weapons." The soldiers adapted. Shields were recalibrated. The humans' advantage disappeared. Except humans did not just have one advantage. They had hundreds. The desert was not empty. The sand hid mines, explosive devices that detonated when stepped on. Zintharian soldiers were torn apart by shrapnel and fire. Human snipers fired from impossible distances, over a mile away where the heat shimmer should have made targeting impossible. Yet their shots found their marks with terrible precision. Artillery shells fell from the sky. Not smart weapons, just explosive shells launched from tubes. Simple, ancient. But when a shell exploded among a group of soldiers, the results were the same as any modern weapon. "Fall back to the dropships," the commander ordered. But the humans had planned for that too. Anti-vehicle weapons struck the dropships, missiles that traveled slower than Imperial weapons but carried warheads that could melt armor. The dropships exploded or became useless hulks of metal. The Zintharian ground commander transmitted a desperate message. "We're surrounded. Need immediate extraction. They're everywhere." Kethazara watched the feed from the soldier's helmet camera. She saw humans advancing through the desert, not running, not charging blindly, moving tactically, using cover, supporting each other, fighting with a coordination that suggested they had trained for this specific scenario. How? She asked no one. How did they know exactly what to expect? Drask pulled up intelligence files. "Admiral, I found something. The humans have been visited by other species over the centuries. Peaceful traders mostly, but each time the humans studied them. Learned about their technology, their tactics. They've been preparing for a hostile encounter for over 100 years, but they could not have known we specifically would come." "They didn't need to know," Drask said quietly. "They prepared for the possibility of any hostile species. They assumed the worst and planned accordingly." On the ground, the situation deteriorated rapidly. Humans fought in the desert heat without slowing. The temperature was 50 degrees Celsius, hot enough to impair Zintharian soldiers who evolved on a cooler world. But humans were built for this. They sweated using their body's own cooling system. They drank water and kept fighting. They had evolved on a world where the temperature could vary by 80 degrees in a single day. This was just another day to them. "Extract the survivors," Kethzara ordered. "Pull them back to orbit." Shuttles descended under heavy fire. They managed to retrieve 300 soldiers. 700 had died in less than an hour. The ground commander was among the survivors. He removed his helmet, his face pale with shock. "Admiral, they're not like any enemy I've ever fought. They feel pain, but they keep fighting. They see their comrades fall, but they don't break. They're wounded, but they don't retreat. They're defending their home," Kethzara said. "No." The commander shook his head. "It's more than that. They enjoy this. I saw one of them smile after taking out 3 of our soldiers. They're not just defending, they're hunting us." Kethzara reviewed the battle data. 700 elite soldiers lost, 3 dropships destroyed. And they had not even reached a major city. This had been open desert, the most favorable terrain possible. "Admiral, we're detecting movement on their moon," a sensor officer reported. The view screen shifted to Luna, the small moon base that intelligence had dismissed as a minor scientific outpost. But now structures were emerging from beneath the surface. Weapons platforms, railguns, missile batteries all pointed at the Imperial fleet. "They militarized their moon," Kethzara said in disbelief. "Under our sensors." "How long?" "Unknown, Admiral. But the construction suggests decades of preparation. The moon's weapons opened fire. From Luna's lower gravity, the railguns could accelerate projectiles to even higher velocities. The kinetic rounds crossed the distance to the fleet in seconds. More impacts, more damage, more deaths. Kethzara made a decision. "Fleet-wide retreat. Pull back to high orbit. Maximum defensive formation." As her ships moved away from Earth, she studied the planet below. It looked the same as when they had arrived. Blue and green and beautiful. But now she saw it for what it truly was. Not a target, Not a prize to be won, a trap. And she had led her entire fleet right into it. On Earth's surface, human soldiers watched the alien fleet retreat. There was no celebration, no cheering, just grim satisfaction. They had drawn first blood. But the real battle had not yet begun. The aliens were wounded, surprised but not defeated, and everyone knew that a wounded predator was the most dangerous kind. But if the aliens wanted a fight, humanity would give them one. After all, humans had been fighting each other for thousands of years. They knew every trick, every strategy, every way to kill and survive. Now they would teach the galaxy what it meant to threaten a species that came from a death world, a species that never, ever surrendered. 3 weeks into the battle for Earth, Fleet Admiral Keth Zara understood true fear. The Imperial fleet had been reduced by 40%. Not destroyed entirely, but damaged badly enough that many ships could barely function. Worse than the physical damage was the psychological toll. Her soldiers were afraid. Her officers were losing confidence. And she could not blame them. The humans were learning. Every day they adapted. Every tactic the Empire used, the humans found a counter within hours. Energy shields that should have protected Xantharian ships were now useless. The humans had analyzed the shield frequencies and modified their weapons. Accordingly, plasma cannons that should have devastated Earth's defenses were being intercepted by clouds of metallic chaff launched from the surface. Simple, primitive, effective. Admiral, we're detecting more human vessels launching from the planet, Drask reported. Keth Zara looked at the display. Dozens of ships rising from Earth's surface. They were not warships. They were civilian vessels. Cargo haulers. Transport shuttles. Mining ships, what are they doing? Her question was answered moments later. The civilian ships accelerated directly toward the Imperial fleet. No weapons fire. No warnings. Just acceleration. They're going to ram us, Drask said in disbelief. Shoot them down. The fleet's defensive guns engaged, destroying the first wave of human ships. But more kept coming, and these ships were not empty. They were loaded with explosives, fuel, anything that could cause damage. The humans had turned their own civilian fleet into weapons. One ship got through the defensive fire. A cargo hauler, its hull scarred and burning, slammed into the side of the cruiser Glorious Dawn. The explosion ripped through 3 decks. 400 more Xantharians died. Pull back, Keth Zara ordered. Move the fleet to extreme high orbit. But even as they retreated, more problems emerged. Human ships were appearing from unexpected directions. Small attack craft that had been hiding in the asteroid belt. Submarines that had been modified to launch missiles from beneath Earth's oceans. Even satellites that had seemed harmless were revealed to be weapons platforms. Humanity had militarized everything. How do they have the resources for this? Keth Zara demanded. They're a single planet. We're an empire of 800 worlds. Drask pulled up economic data. Admiral, their entire society has converted to war production. Every factory, every resource, every citizen is contributing. They've shut down all non-essential industries. Their entertainment industry is producing propaganda. Their food production is rationed. Their civilian population is volunteering for military service in numbers we've never seen. Keth Zara stared at the data. On most worlds, such a conversion would take years. The humans had done it in weeks. Because they had planned for it. Because they had practiced it. Because as she was learning, humans had been preparing for war since the day they looked up at the stars. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from the planet. Audio and video. It's on all channels. Put it through. A human appeared on screen. Female. Young by human standards, perhaps 30 or 40 years old. She wore a military uniform with multiple decorations. Behind her, Keth Zara could see what looked like a command center filled with humans working at computer stations. This is General Sarah Chen of the United Earth Defense Force. I'm addressing Fleet Admiral Keth Zara of the Xantharian Empire. Keth Zara straightened in her command throne. The human knew her name, knew her rank. They had been monitoring Imperial communications. General Chen, Keth Zara responded. You cannot win this war. Surrender now and I will guarantee the safety of your civilians. The human smiled. It was not a friendly expression. Admiral, let me tell you what we've learned about your empire in the past 3 weeks. Your military doctrine is based on overwhelming force and rapid victory. You've never fought a war that lasted more than 6 months. Your longest siege was 18 weeks. Your soldiers are well trained but have no experience with prolonged conflict. She leaned forward. We've been fighting each other for 10,000 years. We know how to wage war in deserts, jungles, Arctic tundra, and vacuum. We know how to fight when outnumbered, how to win with inferior technology, how to survive when survival seems impossible. You're losing ships every day, Kethzara countered. Your casualties are acceptable, Chen interrupted. We can absorb losses that would break any other species. Because we have 8 billion people on this planet, Admiral, and every single one of them is willing to fight. Kethzara felt a chill. 8 billion. Even if only a fraction were military capable, that was a larger army than the Empire had ever faced. You destroyed one of our cargo ships 3 weeks ago, Chen continued. Did you know that ship had a crew of 40? 38 of them had families, children, parents who are still alive. War has casualties, Kethzara said. Yes, and now those families want revenge. That's another thing about humans, Admiral. We remember, we mourn, and we avenge. The transmission ended. Kethzara sat in silence, processing what she had heard. Then she called an emergency meeting of her senior command staff. Options, she demanded. We could bombard the planet from extreme range, one admiral suggested. Destroy their cities. Force them to surrender. That would take months, another countered. And kill billions. The Empire's Council would never approve genocide on that scale. Then we send everything we have, a third admiral said. One massive assault. Overwhelm their defenses through sheer numbers. Drask shook his head. We've lost too many ships for that strategy. And the humans are producing new weapons daily. They're using their industrial base more efficiently than any species I've ever seen. How? Kethzara asked. How are they doing this? Because they're unified, Drask said quietly. Every human nation has put aside its differences. Every corporation has surrendered its resources. Every civilian has accepted the sacrifices. They're acting as one species with one goal, survival. He pulled up historical data. Admiral, I've been studying their past wars. Do you know what happens when you corner humanity? When you give them no choice but to fight or die? What? They win. Against impossible odds, against superior enemies, against all logic and probability. They find a way to win. Kethzara stood and walked to the view screen looking down at Earth. 21 days ago, she had been certain of victory. Now she was not even certain of survival. The humans are preparing something, the sensor officer reported. Massive energy readings from their moon base. And we're detecting unusual activity around their orbital stations. What kind of activity? It looks like they're mining the space around our position, planting explosive devices along our potential retreat vectors. Kethzara realized with horror what the humans were doing. They were not trying to drive the Empire away. They were trying to trap them, to surround them, to destroy them completely. They're hunting us, she said aloud. Yes, Admiral, Drask agreed. We came here as predators, but the humans are turning us into prey. On Earth's surface, General Chen watched the alien fleet on her displays. The enemy was weakening. Their formations were defensive now instead of offensive. They were reacting instead of acting. Good. Status of Operation Anvil? She asked. Ready to launch on your command, General. All munitions in position. All targeting solutions confirmed. Chen nodded. Operation Anvil was humanity's answer to the Imperial fleet. Every railgun, every missile, every weapon system on Earth, Luna, and in orbit, all synchronized to fire simultaneously at the exact same moment. One massive strike designed to cripple the enemy fleet in a single blow. Not yet, Chen said. Let them think they have time to regroup. Let them think they can still retreat. When they try to run, that's when we spring the trap. They could call for reinforcements, an aide said. Let them, Chen replied. If more alien fleets come, we'll have more targets to practice on. And more technology to capture and study. She looked at the countdown clock. The humans had been fighting for 3 weeks. They could fight for 3 years if necessary. 3 decades if they had to, because that was what humans did. They endured. They adapted. They persisted, and they never ever surrendered. Admiral Kethzara stood on the bridge of her flagship and made a decision she had never thought she would make. Prepare the fleet for retreat. We're leaving this system. The staff stared at her in shock. Admiral, the Council ordered us to conquer this world, one officer protested. The Council did not know what we would face, Kethzara replied. And I will not sacrifice what remains of this fleet for pride, Send the order. We retreat in 6 hours. Those would be the longest 6 hours of her life, and the humans were counting on it. The retreat began exactly as planned. Fleet Admiral Kethazara watched as her ships formed up in a defensive convoy. 173 vessels remained from the original 300. Each one damaged. Each one carrying wounded and traumatized soldiers. Prepare for faster-than-light jump, she ordered. Calculate the shortest route back to Imperial space. Route calculated, Admiral. We can jump in 5 minutes, 5 minutes. Just 5 more minutes and they would escape this cursed system. Escape the Death World and its terrifying inhabitants. The sensors screamed a warning. Massive weapons launch from the planet and lunar surface. Multiple trajectories. Thousands of projectiles incoming. Evasive maneuvers. All ships scatter. But there was nowhere to go. The humans had calculated every possible escape route. Railgun projectiles, missiles, and kinetic kill vehicles filled the space around the fleet. It was a carefully constructed kill box. Operation Anvil had been sprung. Explosions rippled through the Imperial formation. Ships broke apart under the concentrated fire. The destroyer Crimson Blade was cut in half by a railgun round. The cruiser Eternal Watch lost all power and began drifting. Smaller vessels simply disintegrated under the barrage. Jump now, Kethazara screamed. Emergency jump! Any heading? The surviving ships activated their faster-than-light drives. Space twisted around them as they prepared to leap to safety. Then the mines detonated. The humans had seeded the jump points with nuclear devices. Old technology. Simple fission bombs that any spacefaring race could build, but placed perfectly to detonate just as the Imperial ships tried to jump. The electromagnetic pulses from the nuclear explosions disrupted the faster-than-light drives. Ships that had been about to jump were torn apart by the competing forces. Reality itself seemed to scream as the fabric of space was ripped and then snapped back. 30 more ships died in that instant. Kethazara's flagship shuddered but held together. The jump drives were damaged but functional. Around her, the bridge crew worked frantically to restore systems. Status report. 78 ships remaining, Admiral. Multiple casualties across all vessels. Jump drives need 10 minutes to recharge. 10 minutes. An eternity in combat. All ships defensive formation. Point defense systems to maximum. We just need to survive long enough to jump. The human weapons fire intensified. But Kethazara noticed something. The rate of fire was decreasing. The humans were running out of ammunition. They had thrown everything they had into that one massive strike. They're spent, Drask said, seeing the same thing. We can still escape. But then new contacts appeared on the sensors. Ships. Human ships. Dozens of them. Launching from Earth's surface and the hidden bases on Luna. These were not civilian vessels converted into weapons. These were military ships. Small, fast, and heavily armed. They had been held in reserve for exactly this moment. Attack craft incoming. Multiple squadrons. The human ships swarmed the Imperial fleet like insects. They were tiny compared to the massive Zintharian warships, but they were quick and aggressive. They fired missiles and railguns at point-blank range, then scattered before the Imperial weapons could target them. It was coordinated chaos. The humans fought without fear, without hesitation. Kethazara watched as one human ship, its hull burning and torn, rammed itself into the engines of a Zintharian cruiser. Both vessels exploded. Admiral incoming transmission from the planet. It's General Chen. Put it through. The human general appeared on screen. She looked tired. There was blood on her uniform, but her eyes were fierce. You're trying to run, Admiral. I don't blame you. But before you go, I want you to deliver a message to your empire. I'm not interested in your threats, Kethazara said. This isn't a threat. It's a warning. Chen gestured off-screen. We're uploading a data package to your ship's communication system. It's footage from the past 4 weeks. Battle recordings, casualties, our tactics, our weapons, everything. Why would you show us your capabilities? Because we want every species in the galaxy to see what happens when you threaten humanity. Chen leaned forward. We didn't want this war. We offered you peace. We gave you warnings. But you came anyway. You destroyed one of our islands. You killed our people. And now you're running back to your empire with your tail between your legs. We still outnumber you, Kethazara said, though even she could hear the weakness in her own voice. For now, Chen agreed. But we're already building more ships, developing new weapons, training more soldiers. And here's the thing about humans, Admiral. We have long memories, very long memories. She stood up, and behind her, Kethazara could see dozens of human soldiers, all of them watching, all of them alive with that same fierce determination. You wanted to conquer Earth. Instead, you've given us something more valuable. You've given us a reason to go to the stars. You've shown us that there are hostile species out there, and now we're going to prepare for them. This isn't over, Kethazara said. No, Chen agreed. It isn't, but it will be. One way or another. The transmission ended. Kethazara sat in her command throne, feeling older than her 2 centuries. Around her, the bridge crew waited for orders. Jump status? Drives recharged, Admiral. We can jump in 30 seconds. She looked at the planet one last time. That beautiful, terrible blue world. She had come here expecting an easy victory. Instead, she had found a species that would haunt the Empire's nightmares for generations. Execute jump. All ships now. Space twisted. Reality bent, and the surviving remnants of the Third Conquest Fleet fled the Sol system, carrying with them the uploaded data package and a lesson that would echo across the galaxy. Never threaten a death world. Never underestimate its children. The human ships did not pursue. They had achieved their objective. The enemy was broken and fleeing. Earth was safe, for now. 3 months later, Fleet Admiral Kethazara stood before the High Council of the Zintharian Empire. She was no longer an admiral. She had been stripped of her rank. Her career was over, but she did not care. She was alive, and 78 ships had survived because she had the courage to retreat. This is an embarrassment, one council member declared. The Empire does not flee from primitive species. They are not primitive, Kethazara said quietly. That was our mistake. They are young, inexperienced in space, but they are not primitive. They are the most dangerous species I have ever encountered. Dangerous? Another council member scoffed. They have 1 planet. We have 800. And they would burn every one of them if they had to, Kethazara replied. I've uploaded all the data. Watch the recordings. Study their tactics. Learn what I learned. The council did watch, and as they did, their dismissive attitudes faded. They saw what Kethazara had seen. Humans fighting in impossible conditions, adapting to every challenge, never surrendering, never breaking. One council member, an elder who had served for 4 centuries, spoke up. I have heard legends from the old races, the ones who were already ancient when our empire was young. They spoke of a species that would one day emerge, a species that came from prey but became predator, a species that pack-bonded with anything, that held grudges across generations, that saw every problem as something to solve rather than endure. He looked at Kethazara. You found them? Yes, she confirmed. They're the Deathworlders, the humans, and we're lucky any of us survived. The council deliberated for hours. Finally, they reached a decision. We will send an ambassador to Earth. We will offer reparations for the damage we caused. We will sign a non-aggression pact, and we will update all Imperial databases with a warning about the Sol system. What warning? Kethazara asked. The elder council member smiled grimly. The Empire was warned, but we ignored the warnings and entered orbit. Do not make our mistake. The message spread across the galaxy, transmitted on all frequencies, broadcast to every species, every civilization, every spacefaring race. Some species laughed, some dismissed it as propaganda, but others, the older races, the ones who had been watching humanity from afar, nodded in understanding. They had all known. The Valkyrie had tried to warn the Empire. The merchant captain had tried to warn them. Even the dying pirate had tried to warn them, but the Empire had been arrogant, confident, certain of their superiority, and they had paid the price. On Earth, humanity celebrated their victory. But General Chen knew better than to celebrate too much. She stood in her command center looking at the stars. They'll come back, one of her aides said. Maybe not the same empire, but someone will come. We've shown the galaxy we're here now. Good, Chen said. Let them come. We'll be ready. Should we build more weapons? Weapons, ships, orbital defenses, and something else, Chen replied. Allies, the galaxy is big. There must be other species who want peace, who prefer trade to conquest. We need to find them, learn from them, build relationships. And if another hostile species comes, Chen smiled. It was the same fierce expression she had shown Kethazara. Then we'll teach them the same lesson we taught the Zintharian Empire. You don't threaten humanity. You don't threaten Earth, and you definitely don't ignore the warnings. She turned back to her work, knowing that humanity's journey to the stars had only just begun, somewhere in the galaxy, on a data terminal in a neutral space station. A file updated automatically. It was the Galactic database, accessible to all spacefaring species.